One of Richard the Lionheart's lesser-known exploits is his conquest of Cyprus from the local Christians. It was spring 1191, nearly 4 years since the holy city of Jerusalem had been retaken by Muslim forces, and the Third Crusade was well underway. In contrast to prior crusades, when thousands had lugged themselves along the land-bound route to Palestine, many opted to go by sea this time, and Richard, the King of England, was among them. The Lionheart began his journey at Lyon on the 4th of July 1190, before setting sail from Marseille, laying anchor at the Sicilian city of Messina on the 23rd of September. Local disputes detained him, while winter made the seas dangerous, delaying his departure to the 10th of April 1191. By this point, the Muslim leader Saladin was trying to break the last kernels of Crusader resistance near the city of Acca. Saladin already ruled Egypt and most of Syria. The Third Crusade would decide whether he finished off the Crusader states for good. In light of the worsening situation, Richard was no doubt eager to get to the Holy Land as quickly as possible, but his attention would soon be drawn to Cyprus. The island was Greek-speaking, and its people swore by Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Thus far, it had played no part in the history of the Crusades. Until 1184, it had been ruled by the Eastern Roman Empire. But during a period of instability, Isaac Ducas Komnenos, a scion of the ruling imperial dynasty, had seized control. He declared himself emperor, but lacked the strength to take the fight to the mainland, so instead Isaac ruled Cyprus as his personal domain. Violence and depravity marred his rule, but while the Cypriots grew more restless, their master was making enemies abroad. Primarily, this revolved around a dynastic dispute over the crown of Jerusalem. 2 men claimed the throne, Guy de Lusignan and Conrad of Montferrat. Isaac threw his lot in with Conrad, but in doing so he had reckoned without King Richard, who was a friend and close ally of Guy de Lusignan. This meant that although Richard had not planned to go to Cyprus, when the opportunity arose he saw no reason not to. He was sailing towards Crete with 200 ships, when adverse winds blew 25 of them off course, all the way to Cyprus. To make things worse, Richard's fiancée and his sister were among those stranded. 3 ships had already been smashed into kindling by the cruel shores of the island, while the inhabitants weren't much kinder, treating the Crusaders poorly. Outrageously, there was an attempt to capture the princesses while they were stuck in the port of Limassol on the south coast. Word reached Richard, who was presently on the island of Rhodes, and he immediately decided to attack the unruly Isaac. Attacking fellow Christians was probably not on Richard's bucket list, especially since the situation in the Holy Land was so dire, but the king moved quickly. He spearheaded an attack on Limassol on the 5th of May, and forced Isaac to retreat to Famagusta on the far side of the island. Reminded of fate's fickleness, Richard took the time to marry his fiancée before moving on to Famagusta, where Isaac's forces were defeated once again. The island was swiftly conquered, and Isaac surrendered on the 1st of June. As part of the terms for his surrender, Richard promised not to clap Isaac in irons, and in a dubious display of honour, Richard had silver manacles made specially for Isaac. In the very short term, Richard's conquest of Cyprus brought him a huge pile of cash with which to wage war. First, he levied a 50% tax on the locals, and then made 40,000 gold coins by selling the island to the Knights Templar. Loaded to the gunwales with gold, King Richard left for Acca, but that's a story for another day. A final upshot of the conquest revolves around an enigmatic princess, who may have been called Maria or Beatrice, but is otherwise known as the Damsel of Cyprus. She was the daughter of Isaac, and Richard took her away as a hostage after the conquest. We shall return to her in a bit. Cyprus soon changed hands for a 3rd time, when it was transferred to Guy de Lusignan. The former claimant to Jerusalem's throne had hung up his crown in return for Cyprus, and henceforth his family ruled the island. By the time of the 4th Crusade, rule of the island had passed to Guy's brother, Aymery de Lusignan. Sure enough, Aymery also became the king of Jerusalem through marriage to Isabella I. A dynastic legacy of Byzantine rule briefly came back to the island during the 4th Crusade. This was the Damsel of Cyprus, the daughter of Isaac Ducas Komnenos. After following Richard around the Holy Land during the 3rd Crusade, she returned with him to Western Europe. Briefly, she was married to Raymond VI of Toulouse, but in the winter of 1202 to 1203 she married Thierry of Flanders, who commanded the Flemish fleet during the Fourth Crusade. Clearly she had an eye on pressing her claim to Cyprus, for when the crusade went east, Thierry and the damsel did not head for Constantinople, but carried on to Cyprus. Thierry tried to press his wife's claim, but King Aimery rebuffed them, and they were forced further east. The damsel soon passed out of history, but she remains an interesting figure nonetheless. Under the Lusignan dynasty, the importance of Cyprus as a strategic outpost only grew, especially as the Crusader states on the mainland were worn down by Muslim attacks. The sea provided protection, but as Muslim power in the Mediterranean strengthened, Aimery looked to shore up the island's position. In 1195, he decided to become the vassal of Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI. To entrench Latin rule of the island, the Lusignans doled out territorial grants to knights and other supporters, although the dynasty was careful not to hand over any castles, and as such the nobility did not build up much of a power base. Internal politics were mostly peaceful, aside from a 13th century civil war, but religion was something of an issue. A disconnect existed between the ruling Catholics and the majority Orthodox populace, which on one occasion led to 13 locals being killed. The Catholics took over most of the big churches while founding some of their own, some of which still stand to this day. Its location, a mere day's sailing from the Levantine coast, made it both a perfect launchpad for future crusades and a lively commercial hub. Trade volumes through Cyprus increased, and the city of Famagusta developed into a wealthy, bustling entrepot. Beyond commerce, the island's fertile fields supported a vibrant agricultural sector. Grain, olive oil and wine were just some Cypriot exports. Merchants from all around the Mediterranean plied the surrounding trade routes and made Cyprus rich in the process. Unfortunately, the ravages of the Black Death set off a long period of economic decline. The Crusaders ruled Cyprus longer than they ruled anywhere else in the east, far longer than they controlled Jerusalem. Successive crusades came to rely on it. The Hungarian splinter of the Fifth Crusade used the island as a base, as did the Seventh Crusade, while Frederick II of the Sixth Crusade also passed through, creating a civil war in the process. During the Ninth Crusade, Muslim forces led a preemptive strike on Cyprus, but the island was only annexed in 1473 into the Venetian Overseas Empire. The Ottomans conquered it a century after that, but that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching. If you want to support this channel, then you can also consider becoming a channel member or joining my Patreon. But for now, goodbye. Many thanks to my generous Patreon supporters and channel members. In particular, Aldous and Chris Manger. Thank you all very much.